America loves showing off its wealth, but drive past the glowing billboards and you'll find towns where the lights barely work, streets crumble, and the water itself can make you sick. This isn't rare. It's what happens when entire communities get erased from the economic map. No jobs, no help, no coverage, just eerie silence and homes selling for $13,000 that nobody wants. Today we're diving into America's abandoned corners, where poverty feels cinematic and every property listing comes with hidden consequences. One town reported hookworm in 2023. Another has fewer than 40 people and no sewage system. Think you know America's most broken towns? Let's test that theory. Number 10, Allendale, Missouri. There's a town in America that literally got flooded out and never recovered. This place is basically the country's smallest official ghost town with a zip code. And it's still on the census, if you're keeping score. Population? Roughly 38 people. That's not a typo, that's a bowling team. Let's run the numbers because weird towns deserve clear facts. Population sits around 38 residents, fewer humans than a high school class. Home prices drop below $6,000. Yes, $6,000. Infrastructure is non-existent. No sewer system, limited electricity, roads that'll destroy your rental car, businesses. Imagine a ghost town, remove the museum, and add actual mail delivery. Employment opportunities are practically ceremonial. Allendale doesn't decline slowly. It vanishes like a cheap sweater in a hot dryer. Here's the dark reality. Allendale's collapse isn't from lack of beauty, it's from being completely ignored. Flooding here isn't occasional, it's constant. Repeated river overflows have destroyed basic infrastructure. But guess what doesn't arrive after floodwaters recede? Consistent federal or state investment. Local officials have petitioned for mitigation funds. They've applied for grants, they've proposed levies and drainage plans. But larger towns nearby with bigger tax bases and louder representatives always get priority. Allendale gets ignored. Want a town where FEMA mail doesn't even land anymore? Here it is. Those $6,000 homes sound cheap, but cheap doesn't cover reality. No consistent sewer. Electricity that blinks out constantly. Roads that make potholes look aspirational. Cheap here isn't freedom. It's abandonment dressed as opportunity. Number 9, Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Johnstown has survived 3 catastrophic floods, 1 industrial collapse, and a tourism economy built on tragedy. And somehow, it's still standing. Barely, but standing. Welcome to Johnstown, where the American dream got waterlogged in 1889, gentrification never showed up, and homes now sell for less than a used snowblower. Let's cut through the nostalgia. Yes, the city survived disasters, but the slowest, cruelest disaster is neglect. The numbers tell everything. Median home price sits around $22,000, with many listings dropping under $15,000. Population crashed from 60,000 in the 1950s to just over 18,000 today. Poverty rate exceeds 35%, with child poverty around 40%. Unemployment consistently runs higher than national average with minimal job growth. Crime rate sits lower than some places, but still above national average, especially property crimes. The steel industry collapse hit Johnstown like a wrecking ball made of pink slips. The city never recovered. What remains feels like a museum to economic death. Beautiful hills, rusted bridges, an eerie silence that feels cinematic, but not enjoyably. After the infamous 1889 flood that killed over 2,000 people, the city became a national symbol for rebuilding. Fast forward a century and Johnstown's flooding continues. But now help arrives slower. Federal aid comes piecemeal, state investment appears sporadically, economic planning mostly involves PowerPoints and press conferences. Johnstown belongs to the Appalachian Regional Commission, a government program designed to help struggling regions. Sounds promising until you realize most ARC funding flows to politically shinier locations. Towns with Instagram-worthy main streets and fewer collapsing bridges. Meanwhile, Johnstown gets Band-Aid grants and pilot programs that never scale. Spreadsheet form. Number 8, Selma, Alabama. Selma helped change American history, so you'd think America would have returned the favor. It didn't. Selma is one of the most important cities in US history. The Edmund Pettus Bridge appears in textbooks, documentaries, murals, and speeches. But what nobody mentions is that once cameras left, the investment left with them. This is what happens when a place becomes a symbol instead of a priority. Let's ground this in numbers because nostalgia doesn't fix potholes. Median home price hovers around $22,000 to $25,000. Yes, you can purchase history for the price of a used pickup. Poverty rate sits roughly at 38 to 40% of residents. Unemployment consistently exceeds national average with limited private sector jobs. Population trend shows over 25% decline since the 1960s. Health access relies on one main hospital serving the area, and even that's been financially unstable. Selma isn't violent the way people expect. The real threat here isn't crime, it's stagnation. The slow grind of watching young people leave because opportunity already did. A local posted online, "People come here to see the bridge, then ask where everyone went. That question answers itself. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Selma gets remembered instead of funded. Federal and state governments love commemorating the past here. Plaques, reenactments, anniversaries. But when it comes to infrastructure, schools, healthcare, or job creation, suddenly budgets tighten. Alabama consistently ranks near the bottom nationally for education, spending, and healthcare access. And rural black communities like Selma feel that first and hardest. What nobody tells you is that Selma isn't underdeveloped because it lacks importance. It's underdeveloped because importance doesn't come with a line item. Number 7, Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Pine Bluff isn't poor because it's small. It's poor because it was useful until it wasn't. This city did exactly what America asked. Worked the land, ran the mills, fed the factories, and when the profits dried up, Pine Bluff got the corporate version of, "We'll call you." They never did. Pine Bluff sits in southeast Arkansas, right in the Delta. Flat land, brutal summers. Once a manufacturing and agricultural hub, then globalization happened and Pine Bluff stayed put. Let's get into the numbers because vibes don't explain this kind of collapse. Median home price ranges around $21,000 to $24,000. Some listings dip below 15 grand. Good luck finding financing. Poverty rate hits roughly 30 to 33%. That's 1 in 3 people. Unemployment regularly exceeds national average with limited white-collar work. Violent crime rate runs about 4 to 5 times higher than US average. Population trend shows over 25% decline since 2000. The people who could leave did. This isn't subtle decline, it's visible. Empty storefronts, overgrown lots where homes used to stand, entire blocks that feel paused mid-sentence. You know it's bad when Zillow says great potential and doesn't even pretend what kind. Here's where Pine Bluff gets stuck in the loop. Arkansas consistently ranks near the bottom nationally in education, funding, healthcare access, and public infrastructure spending. Pine Bluff, being poor and majority black, gets hit hardest. The city has cycled through revitalization plans for decades. Task forces, committees, vision statements with sunsets on the cover, but little sustained capital. Most state-level economic development money in Arkansas flows toward Northwest Arkansas. Bentonville, Fayetteville, places already doing fine. Pine Bluff doesn't get triage. Number 6, East Street Louis, Illinois. You know a place is in trouble when the biggest economic driver is leaving. East Street Louis isn't just a town in decline. It's what happens when American neglect becomes a blueprint. This is not the story of a city that failed. It's the story of a city that was systematically abandoned, then blamed for the fallout. Right across the Mississippi River from the Gateway Arch, that shiny national monument is a city where life expectancy is up to 10 years lower than the US average. Yeah. Welcome to the forgotten basement of the American dream. Let's start with numbers that feel like satire but aren't. Median home price sits around $18,000, which sounds like a steal until you realize some homes literally don't have walls. Poverty rate exceeds 43%, one of the highest in the country. Unemployment isn't just high, it's generational. Violent crime rate frequently ranks in the top 5 most dangerous cities in America. Some years, number 1. Infrastructure resembles post-apocalyptic settings with better graffiti. There are entire neighborhoods without reliable running water, functional streetlights, or even trash pickup. And the kicker? You can see the street, Louis skyline glittering in the distance, like a cruel joke from across the river. So close to million-dollar condos, but you can't get a pothole filled without summoning a city council seance. Let's talk about how East Street Louis got here. Short version, racism, corruption, and redlining had a 3-way and left the kid with the bill. This city was once a thriving industrial hub. Steel, rail, jobs. But when white flight hit and industries bailed in the 60s and 70s, so did the tax base. That's when the state came in. Not to help, but to take over. Number 5, Camden, New Jersey. Camden, New Jersey, where the skyline includes Philly's billion-dollar condos and your street might not have trash pickup. Welcome to Camden, where the American dream took a left turn, hit a pothole, and never got back up. Just across the Delaware River from downtown Philadelphia, we're talking literal walking distance, sits a city that feels trapped in an economic glitch since the 1980s. Camden is what happens when a place gets gentrification around it, but not in it. Let's talk real stats nobody wants to discuss. Median home price hits $17,400. Not a typo. That's the Zillow price of a decent couch in Manhattan. Poverty rate exceeds 36%, more than triple the national average. Unemployment frequently hovers around double the national rate. Violent crime rate runs 5 times higher than US average. Camden's been ranked among the most dangerous cities in America for over a decade. High school graduation rate barely reaches 65%. Water quality complaints stay consistent. Infrastructure remains patchwork. Public services uneven at best. But then here's the twist. Camden has seen over $2 billion in public and private investment since 2013. Corporate campuses, police upgrades, a new waterfront park. So why are so many blocks still crumbling? Because the money came in through the front door and walked right past the people living upstairs. A Camden local once said, "We got skyscrapers, but I still have to take 2 buses to find a grocery store that's not just chips and beer." Camden's real estate is cheap, but the emotional tax is brutal. Living here means navigating underfunded schools, few medical services, and decades of broken promises. Number 4, Cairo, Illinois. There's a town in America where the population collapsed by more than 80%, and the streetlights still turn on every night, like they're waiting for people who never came back. Cairo sits at the dramatic confluence of the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. On paper, that's destiny. Historically, it was. River trade, railroads, factories. This place once punched way above its weight. But then the rivers shifted, the jobs left, and the exits never stopped filling. What's actually broken here? Population dropped from approximately 15,000 in 1920 to under 2,000 today. That's not decline, that's evacuation by economics. Property prices see homes routinely listing between $10,000 to $25,000. Some sit unsold for years. Poverty hits roughly 40% plus of residents living below the poverty line. Infrastructure shows entire blocks boarded up. Utilities still run, but for who? Employment sees major employers vanished decades ago. What nobody tells you is that replacement industries never arrived. A local once wrote on Reddit, "Cairo feels like a movie set after the crew packed up and forgot to yell cut." That's not poetic exaggeration, it's urban reality. Surprisingly, the town didn't just lose people, it lost momentum. Schools consolidated, housing projects were demolished, services thinned out until even staying felt like a statement instead of a choice. Here's the irony. Cheap housing doesn't mean cheap living. When jobs are scarce and services are distant, every dollar stretches thinner. Isolation becomes expensive. Hope becomes a line item you can't afford. Yeah, you can buy a house for the price of a used Honda, but congratulations. Now your commute is unemployment and your nightlife is the sound of plywood flapping in the wind. Number 3, Marianna, Arkansas. Marianna, Arkansas is the kind of place where even the soul food gave up. A town once famous for barbecue that made national best of lists now has more boarded buildings than working stoplights. Yes, really. Tucked deep in the Arkansas Delta, Marianna has quiet southern charm and an economic crisis no one wants to discuss. Let's hit you with the numbers that matter. Median home price ranges $17,000 to $23,000. That's not affordable. That's an SOS. Poverty rate exceeds 45%, one of the highest in the nation. Median household income sits around $22,000, less than half the US average. Unemployment hovers around double the national rate. Crime stays moderate compared to some others on this list, but theft and property crime are common. It's the kind of place where opportunity didn't just leave. It shut off the lights, took the barbecue, and didn't even bother to lie about coming back. You know it's bad when the best thing to do in town is drive somewhere else, delivered with a smile. But it stings. You can buy a house in Marianna for less than the price of an iPhone, but good luck getting cell service to use it. Marianna isn't just broke, it's structurally abandoned. Arkansas ranks near the bottom in public health, education funding, and infrastructure investment. That's not just bad luck. That's budget choices stacked over decades. Federal attention barely exists. State support mostly performative. Even revitalization zones skip over places like Marianna in favor of towns closer to highways or political donor bases. And let's not forget, this is the seat of Lee County, which ranks as one of the poorest counties in the entire US and has been for decades. One of the only notable investments? Prison jobs. Because in places like Marianna, incarceration often gets more attention than education. Number 2, Gary, Indiana. Gary is what happens when a city builds its entire identity around one industry, and that industry decides it's done with you. This place wasn't just prosperous, it was powerful. Steel built Gary, funded schools, paid mortgages, and created a middle class that actually existed. Then globalization showed up, shook hands, and quietly unplugged the life support. Let's talk numbers, because nostalgia lies. Population collapsed from nearly 180,000 at its peak to under 70,000 today. Median home prices float between $35,000 to $50,000, with plenty dipping far lower. Poverty rate hovers around 35%. Unemployment regularly exceeds national averages. Violent crime rates remain among the highest in the Midwest. Entire neighborhoods are functionally empty, but still technically alive on a map. Downtown feels like a movie set where the apocalypse already happened and nobody bothered to film it. Schools closed, hospitals downsized, and public services stretched thin enough to see through. Gary isn't ignored because it's small. It's ignored because fixing it would be expensive, complicated, and politically inconvenient. The cruelest part is location. Gary sits right next to Chicago. You can literally see opportunity from here. You just can't reach it without leaving everything behind. Number 1, Detroit, Michigan. Detroit doesn't need an introduction. It's already been used as a warning label. Once the richest city per capita in America, Detroit built cars for the world and confidence for a nation. Then automation, outsourcing, corruption, and policy failure teamed up like a bad heist movie and cleaned the place out. Here's the reality check. Population dropped from over 1.8 million in the 1950s to around 630,000 today. Median home prices range from $40,000 to $70,000, with thousands of abandoned properties still sitting unsold. Poverty rate exceeds 30%. Unemployment remains volatile. Infrastructure failures are so common they barely make headlines anymore. Entire blocks sit empty. Schools closed faster than they opened, streetlights went dark so often residents stopped reporting it, and yet, Detroit is constantly described as coming back. Yes, downtown looks better. Yes, there are coffee shops and tech offices, but revival here is selective. The comeback has a zip code restriction. Detroit isn't America's worst city. It's America's most honest one. It shows exactly what happens when profit matters more than people and when rebuilding only counts if it photographs well. These towns aren't mistakes. They're what happens when profit moves on and people don't. If this made you uncomfortable, that's the point. Like, subscribe, and stick with GlobeWisp, because stories like this don't get told unless someone bothers.